Hi, my name's Gary. I'm an alcoholic, and welcome to the Saturday night recovery meeting for Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a working step meeting, and we'll meet for approximately 1 hour without a break, 1.5 hours without a break. And out of respect for others, we request that you refrain from cross-talking or commenting while others are sharing. And if you keep yourself muted while we're moving forward and other people are talking, that would be appreciated. And we'll just take a moment of silence here to remember those of us in and out of the rooms and still struggling. And we'll follow out by the set aside prayer. Thank you. So, God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, recovery, you, and the 12 steps, that I might have an open mind and a new experience. Amen. I'd like to just keep that in mind. Um, for the last 2 weeks, we've been kind of embarked on the right sizing exercise, as you know, I've come to understand it, which is step 5, and the whole purpose of it is to humble ourselves before God, ourselves, and another human being. We share the obstacles that are in our path, the personal growth, and the obstacles in the path of greater recovery. We share that with another person. And as I like to say, this exercise helps us find out where we're starting from so we can move on from there. And as Jill would say, we get to know who Jill 1.0 is so we can move on to Jill 2.0. And hopefully you've all have made some progress on that. Is there anybody here who's actually taken their step 5 over the last 2 weeks that would maybe like to share on that experience?
I'm kind of talking to Amy about it, but we haven't gone through all of it.
Haven't quite got there yet? Okay. Michelle, I think you've been down that road over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I have actually. However, there is some that I haven't finished. So I had a good start and I thought I was complete done, but yeah, I don't know. It was a bit of a
You don't have to be specific, but
yeah, there's just one bit that I have to go back and do a little bit more. But the first bit was really good and it was I don't know, I can't put it into words right now, but it felt good. It was really good. It was some resentment that I've held on to forever, like 17 years or so. Yeah, about 16 years. I know exactly actually. But yeah, so it was good. It was
well, when
really
you get
pardon?
no, go ahead. Sorry.
What were you saying? What did you ask?
I didn't ask. I was just going to say, if it takes that long to build the resentment, it can be very hard to let it go. So good on you.
Yeah, I
And
wasn't
great on you
able to.
for actually realizing that, it's still there and it really should get to the table. So
Yeah, I had
well
tried
done.
before when I did my step 5 with my sponsor before, my previous sponsor, and I
Hmm.
didn't have the same relief. Like I didn't have that same, I can breathe now, I get it. It's over now. It happened and it's just put on a shelf feeling, and I didn't have that before when I tried to let it go. So this time around was really good. Yeah, really different.
Awesome.
It makes me want to go to sorry, one last, makes me want to go to, when I'm done this step, let's go find another sponsor and do the steps over again, just because the last sponsor was different than this time. And I'm like, oh, everybody has something different. Like, this is fun.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the program, right? Is that you could just, once you get through the first set of steps, you just move on to the next set of steps and you can just keep doing it. I mean, a lot of people take breaks in between, but you can do them as often as you want. So, and it's like they talk about the peeling of the onion, as you move forward, as you mature in your sobriety, you start to understand that some of the things that you looked at one way are not what you thought. You know, I know for me, there were a lot of things that I originally thought were assets that turned out, to be instincts out of array, or out of balance. And my assets were actually, liabilities as well. and learning to put them into balance was very important. But I learned that through doing the steps. Yeah.
Hi,
Anybody
Lara,
else?
alcoholic.
Hey, Lara.
I really just what you touched upon about assets being liabilities. I when I did the work too, I definitely saw that. You know, for example, like you know, where's my list? Yeah, just that some of my assets, I kind of looked and I was like, oh, actually, that's actually kind of a liability. Like, let me just see here an example. Well, now where's my asset list? Like the fact that I do try to live a pretty like balanced life, but sometimes I can get into a little bit of perfectionism. What else was another one? I don't know. I can't remember actually examples. My brain goes a little bit blank. But yeah, I thought that some of my assets some of them did become liabilities. Oh, what was one? Anyway, I'll have to write that down. Sorry about that. But yeah, just my liability list definitely is getting smaller, I find, because I had quite a big large one when I did my steps to whatever a year and a half ago. I definitely have changed through doing some of the work and just the consistency through prayer and coming to the meetings and hearing the stories and putting into practice the principles, which has been really great. So it's all about consistency and being in the meetings and hearing the stories for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Lara. It's definitely all about being in the
Oops.
middle of this thing. Anybody else like to talk any bits about step 4 or 5, where they're at? And
Yeah, I'll say just to encourage anybody that is doing 4 and 5 that for me the first time I did it many years ago now, um, but I thought that I had some idea of what I was doing. In fact, I thought I was doing it perfectly. And it turned out that I wasn't. It turned out that I didn't have a clue. It turned out I didn't even understand the principles, even honesty and open-mindedness and willingness. Those, like, I knew the dictionary meanings of them, but the point is that I made a stab at it, and I did my best, and with what I knew at that time. And then I did it again. Then did step 4 and 5 again. And and also the step 4 I did. I guess it must be 25 years ago now, but I did it in the way of the big book and exactly with the columns and all those kinds of things. And I definitely had a spiritual awakening. There was a change in my outlook on my life and on other people. And I remember that. And I remember that was what gave me the motive to carry on and to continue and to do the step 5. So then I did that, like I was saying, the best I could. But anyways, it was many years last year when I did step 5 last year. I did it in Tawasin. It was in the summertime, and it was out in the by the water. And again, I did it to the best of my ability. But now I can see that there are some pieces. I would like to go back and do it again, and I will probably this week coming up. But each time, it gets better. That's all I can say.
yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ron. Susie, would you like to add anything?
I was digging through all of my papers trying to come up with I did step 5 relatively recently, but I kind of have the same thing as the depth of this more detail. The first time I went through the steps, it was a lot more superficial. And this makes me think more and deeper. And I appreciate what I'm gaining very much. So thank you.
Good. Is there anybody who's still struggling with step 4 or 5 that would like to speak? Got anything to add? The beautiful thing about this too is that even if you haven't managed to get to your step 5 yet, there's still time. This week we're going to be talking about steps 6 and 7, but they're very easy to take on the backside of step 5. So, if you haven't had an opportunity yet this week to do your step 5 and you can fit it in somewhere during this week, you'll find that it all just kind of flows together very seamlessly. So that's really nice. Comes a bit more of a problem when you get to like step 7 or 8 and 9, because there's some definite work involved in that. But until we get to that point, there's still room to slide in and get your step 5 under your belt. John, have you got anything you'd add?
I just want to add to in that each time I get deeper into the 12-step program without even realizing it. I get more involved in it. I get more like my mind it has changed over the years. At one time, I used to just think about who can I rip off. And I don't think about that no more. And it's been quite a while actually since I have thought about that. And I have completely 100% changed from the time when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous to now. And it just as a result of doing these steps, and I just get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I like the process. It is a process, and there's still some things that and I learned a lot about myself, and I just want to say that I keep trying.
Thanks, Rod. One thing I can say is, when I first came in the doors, my life was based on a foundation of fear. Some of it irrational, some of it real. But fear and insecurity were I didn't understand that when I first came in, but that was my go-to. Every decision I made was basically based on some sort of fear. And, even though my life looked good on the outside, I was dying on the inside because my attitude towards life was really bad. And this program taught me how to rewire that, over time by adopting the principles, doing the work. My life went from one that was based on a foundation of fear to one that was based on a foundation of gratitude. No matter what's going on in my life these days, I wake up every morning just grateful that, I get a chance to try to do better today, whether I fall down, during the day and have to pick myself up again. I understand that I have those options now, and that was not the way I saw it when I came in here. So, doing this work is, as I've said in previous meetings, was the most profound thing that I've ever done in my life, as far as creating a better life for myself. I love when people say, I came here because I wanted a better life, and I stay here because I got one, and a lot of things on the outside don't look much different, but everything about the way I look at life has changed. And that's, the real gift of this thing. So, yeah, glad I'm here. Glad you guys are here. Hey.
Sure. John, alcoholic.
Hey, John.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I did my step 5. I guess I was maybe like 6 months into the program when I did my step 5 with my sponsor. And going through this process again just to help, clarify that, yeah, I did a pretty thorough job the first time I went through, but it's always important to sort of reflect and not sort of rest on your laurels, thinking that, okay, now that I've done a set of steps, that therefore everything's going to be hunky dory in life. But things do come up, and that's where these following steps, step 6 and 7, really, help to guide me in terms of, okay, what defects have come up since I did my first set of steps, and what do I still need to work on? Because, this is, the great thing is this is a lifelong process. It doesn't have to be done in a day, but if you did a set of steps in a day, you probably could, but it would be challenging, obviously. But the idea is that, you're doing the set of steps from where you are now, and not where you will be in the future or where you were in the past. It's where you are today. And I think that's really important. And for me, I felt the presence of my higher power, and that was really what helped sort of convince me that I had done steps 1 through 3 properly. Was that, yeah, I felt my higher power while I was sharing my step 5 with my sponsor, and it helped deepen that connection. And now there are days where, my conscious contact with my higher power, I may wane on. And so it's up to me to, keep doing it on a daily basis. And the more I've done it, the more I know that my higher power is working in my life. So that's what I got for now. I think.
That was actually a question I wanted to ask as well. Is there anybody that's still struggling with, contact or connection with a higher power, the concept of a higher power, or, because that's a pretty, it can be a pretty big stumbling block if you're still struggling and not sure. It's like, I still can't define what my higher power is, but I know it's there, and that's good enough for me, and coming to that realization was a huge milestone for me. I love the idea that, if I can define my higher power, then it's probably not big enough for me. It's just, there is something out there that's working in my life, and, I don't question that. So I have I reach out, I have faith in my higher power. And for me, the real, it's kind of like we're talking about understanding the difference between assets and liabilities and seeing them change. It's kind of like faith. I've come to understand that, originally I had faith, but my faith was much stronger when things were going well. What I had to find was having faith when things were challenging, and, relying on that. And I've seen it work in my life where just having faith, relying on my higher power, turning it over, is when things seem to just start to flow. When I'm thinking I'm in charge, things start to go astray. But when I get out of the way and let my higher power guide me, my life seems to fall back into place pretty quick. So on that note, is there anybody else that would like to talk a little bit about step 4 and 5 before we move on to step 6 here? Okay. On that note, what I'm going to suggest we do next is read the entire section of the big book that relates to steps 6 and 7. And if you've looked ahead or if you've read it in the past, you know that it's a whole summary of 2 paragraphs on page 76 in the big book. So if you got your big book handy, and Ron, if you're able to pull that up, then we'll take a couple of minutes and just read through them. Is there anybody that's got it up or can see it that would like to read one of the paragraphs for us?
I can. This is
Page-
Susie, alcoholic.
All right, Susie.
Do you want me? I start with now we need more action.
Sorry,
Page 76.
page
what-
76. Yep.
No, it's. I think it's if we can answer to our satisfaction. It's right at the
Yeah.
top of the page.
Oh, okay. Start at the top. Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
Well, amazingly enough, I was going for the middle. Okay. If we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness to as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. I'll pass to
Perfect.
someone else.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
I read that. Oh my goodness. I read
Yeah.
whoops.
Step 6
Sorry.
and 7.
That is
It's so
that
good.
is all the big
Indeed.
book says about step 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Which
It
is
sure was good though.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's very short, but you know, when you think about it, it's a very powerful thing. And we'll go into the step 6 and 7 readings in the Little Red Book in a minute. But the one thing that you know, I like to keep in mind when I read through this, you know, when you go like, oh, it's just so simple, and like, where's the action and where? Yep. For me, I could not stop drinking on my own. I don't know about anybody else on the screen, but I could not put the bottle down on my own. But when I finally got honest, you know, and for me, I asked for help in an empty room, watching a full bottle of vodka roll away from me, and no concept of a higher power, but I just, you know, in desperation, asked for help, and for whatever reason, you know, everything changed at that time, you know, and I've never had to have a drink since. And I'm coming up on my 24 years here in a couple of weeks, you know, and, you know, I didn't do it, you know, like I got out of the way and just asked for help. And yeah, I've done a lot of work since then, but, you know, things change because you know, let down my guard and finally asked for help, you know, and then I asked for help, something I didn't believe in, didn't understand, and then I started asking help from the people around me. You know, I came into this particular room, you know, very quickly within a couple of days. You know, one of our neighbors who was a nursing manager in this facility came over. She was my wife's best friend, and she gave us the information on the rooms and gave me the numbers of some drug and alcohol counselors. But something had changed. You know what? When I started that day out, I was prepared at that point to lose my wife, kids. I'd already compromised my job. Everything was about to be taken because, you know, it was more important that I drank for another day than I make any kind of a change. But when I actually, you know, surrendered, said I can't live this way anymore, and just asked for help, it all changed. And you know, I didn't really do anything other than change my attitude, my outlook on my drinking. Got honest with myself and said I can't do this alone. And that's what step 6 is all about. Is, you know, and 7 are just saying, hey, you know, if you can't, I guess back up a bit. Is there anybody here who doesn't think that their alcoholism is not a character defect? You know, it's probably the biggest character defect I have. And I asked for help, and that was removed. You know, the obsession was removed over time, and everything changed. So, you know, are we now ready to let God remove these other things? You know, we've identified the other things that are standing in our way of having a better life. So, what the step is saying is just get out of the way. You know, ask God for help, and and align yourself with a spiritual way of life. And that's what this is. This is a spiritual program, and the principles are spiritual principles. They're very simple. Honesty, openness, willingness. And when you do that, things change. Like, as we all know, doesn't mean that every one of your character defects is going to be taken right away, but just going through the motion of asking for help, and having some faith that if you ask, it might, your life can change, is all it takes. And that's all that these steps are about. We're going to read about, them in a bit more detail. As some people say, Bill decided that, he didn't really, there was no monetizing in the big book. So he wrote the 12 by 12 and that as a supplementary work to help flesh it out a bit. And, there's a lot more in the Little Red, or the 12 by 12 and the Little Red book going on about steps 6 and 7. But at the root of it, it's just getting out of the way and asking God for help. I've identified what's going on in my life. This is my 1.0 version, and I'd like to make some changes and just let go of the things that aren't working for me anymore and move forward. So that's what step 6 and 7 is all about. And on that note, we'll flip it over and just start reading from the Little Red book. Ron, I think you've got that geared up there.
You can see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know we don't have Jill here and her dynamic reading ability and the amazing way she can jump in. So I'm going to try to pick up the concepts as we go through it. But just before we read that, I'm just going to read a little bit from the summary that the Little Red book workbook has, and it says, starting with step 6, it says, anyone who is willing and honestly tries this step has advanced spiritually. Old timers have proven this step works. Somehow I've become an old timer. I don't know when that happened, but in our group, I'm now one of the old timers, which is, to me, still amazing. It says, watch them and see their inner peace as serenity takes place of the turmoil and conflict. Sorry, Ron, that's the Novelka one. We're on the Little Red.
Yeah, I was just looking at it. So
yeah, okay.
I put it back.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We're not reading this yet, but I'm reading from the summary here. And actually, on that note, one thing I was going to say is that, what is promised is happy and content in sobriety. And for me, what really changed, when I was drinking and trying not to drink, my real focus was on not drinking, and that didn't work. I spent a lot of years trying not to drink. But when I came in here and surrendered and started doing the work that's laid out in the program, I started learning how to live sober, and that's when my life changed. That's when I started to find, happiness and contented sobriety. It says, let us look at 2 words in step 6, entirely ready. We are willing to go any length in our recovery quest. Few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at perfection. How then can we accept the entire implication of step 6? This step is a goal towards which we strive. It is a measuring stick by which we can determine our progress. The urgent thing is that we at least make a beginning. And Ron was talking about that when he was sharing earlier, the first time he did the steps, the important thing was that he started, he made a beginning, he made an effort. And as he attested, things started to change. And that's been my experience and what I've watched in people around me. When you make the effort, when you just start to make a beginning, things change. And an earnest try is the way I like to describe it. It says, we all have natural instincts and drives. When these drives, instincts, or desires surpass their intended purposes, they then become character defects. We talked about that at the beginning here. When we use them to demand more satisfaction than they are able to deliver, we are left in a disquieting emotional state. And, it's always described in our meetings as irritable, restless, and discontent, and if my instincts start to get out of balance now, I still find myself having moments of, irritable, restless, discontent. But I know what to do about that now, which is the beautiful thing. It doesn't mean I'm never going to have them anymore, but I have tools to work with, and that's what this program's out to give me. It says we become successful in attaining a healthy attitude in the trying rather than the conquest. Step 6 is the adoption of an attitude by which we begin a lifetime job of building a better character. And, I've heard this program described as a spiritual character building program. And I love that idea, through the help of spiritual principles, I'm going to build my character. There was a guy that used to come to our meetings years ago. He's passed away now, but he used to say, at the end of my days, I want to be known. He said, I just trying to remember how to phrase it now. Sorry, I didn't write this down. So, but at the end of my days, I want to be known for my character, not as a character. And, I love that idea, because when I came in here, could be described as known as a character because my drinking led to behaviors that I wasn't proud of, but these days, I live my life along the principles of this program as much as I can. And I'd like to think that at the end of my days, people would, be able to talk about my character as being something something that I'd be proud of, known for my character, not as a character. It says certain attitudes can be deadly. In our quest for recovery, some of these attitudes are listed at the top of the next page. And those attitudes are like, no, never. To this step is a closed mind. Delay, to this step is dangerous. And rebellion, this step is fatal. I just have to get out of the way. Anyways, Ron, if you've got it right there. So can I ask maybe Laura, would you mind starting us off with steps 6 and 7? And I can't see who's on the screen, so
I'll
Laura?
pass it off to someone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Laura, Alcoholic Addicts.
Hey, Laura.
Step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. It is only after we have completed step 5, when humility has been experienced and self-respect has been restored, as a result of our admitting to God and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, that we are in a suitable spiritual condition to sincerely carry out the provisions of step 6 and 7. This action brings a hitherto unknown feeling of moral strength. For the first time, we are facing our real selves, the selves whose withered roots have touched and are now drawing upon an unfailing source of assurance, power, and security. We find in the consummation of these steps a new place, a new peace, a release from tension and anxiety, as we now are laying our misconceptions, our defects of character in God's hands. We are asking him to rid them from our lives. We are exerting great mental cooperation with God. We feel an intense humility that cries out for recognition and divine help. And here's key idea number 1. The spiritual lift, the nearness of our Creator that is experienced from humble invocation of his help and our willingness to be freed from old willful thoughts and habits are all essential to successful attainment of these steps. Do you want to speak to that?
I'm really thrilled the fact that you're already following along and you've got them identified. So the spiritual lift, the nearness to our Creator that is experienced from humble invocation of his help. Now, I don't know about, like I say, everybody on the screen, and I know John talked about it as well, but when I did my step 5, you know, it really brought me closer to my creator or higher power, whatever you want to call it. I went into that meeting, you know, thinking that, knowing that I was supposed to have my higher power with me, but not really knowing what that meant. But as I progressed through my step 5, by the end of that meeting, I felt like there was a connection there. You know, like I felt that I understood that I was human, and that, you know, that was okay. You know, that there, you know, I'm not a god. You know, I'm not the center of the universe. I've came to understand much better where my place was in the bigger picture. And for whatever reason, you know, I've talked about that before. The fact that in my drinking days, I was really good at being alone in a crowd full of people. You know, I would isolate. I would, you know, shut myself off. I wouldn't let anybody get near to me. You know, let the guards down and let people know who I really was. And this process, you know, helped me bring down those walls and let somebody else in close. You know, and having somebody else that close is a spiritual act. You know, it's letting your, you know, who you are connect with somebody else in a very I guess the only way I can say it is spiritual level. And yeah, you know, it was the first time I really felt willing to be free from my old willful thoughts and habits, you know, ready to adopt something different. And yeah, like I said, I'm not Jill. I'm not quite as good at you know, jumping on these things and expressing them the way she has, but I know the feelings. You know, I know that that she would talk about the, you know, just the nearness to God that comes with getting out of the way, you know, and understanding where you are in the big scheme of things, you know, as far as your presence in the universe. And like I say, for whatever reason, ever since that my first step 5, I've always felt like my creator, my higher power is with me, and you know, 24 years later, that feeling's never left. And you know, what a beautiful thing to be able to carry around. All right, somebody else want to pick it up from there?
I can read my
Okay, thanks, Maya.
no problem. The mental hygiene and spiritual house cleaning we have started in our inventories and continued in step 5 reached their climax in step 7, when we fully subject our wills to God and wish to surrender to Him all our moral imperfections. The several objectives of step 6 and 7 are: 1, to become honest and humble, to willingly seek God's help without reservation. 2, to perfect ourselves in the practice of unselfish prayer. 3, to be aware of our defective character trait. 4, to desire the removal. 5, to surrender completely all defects of character. 6, to believe God can remove them. 7, to ask Him to take them all away. I'll keep going.
Yep.
The
Yes, please.
results we expect from pursuit of these objectives are: 1, a reconciliation to God's way of doing business. We become fed up with our way and with further practice of trying to run the show ourselves. 2,
Hey,
a willingness.
let's say we'll stop there for a second, because that is in the workbook that talks about key idea 2. You know, we experienced a reconciliation to God's way of doing business. And excuse me, when somebody was talking about the steps with me in my early days, you know, they said, actually, and it comes up in the Joe and Charlie tapes if you listen to them, when they talked about step 3, you know, and step 4, it talks about well, step 3, I guess it says, you know, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood them. You know, and in there, their outline, they say, your thoughts are your will and your actions are your lives. And then turn them over to a spiritual way of life. Hand them over to God, but also your higher power. But start aligning your thoughts and your actions with a spiritual way of life. And what they point out quite well is that the rest of this program is a spiritual course of action. It's a spiritual way of life. You'll hear people that have been around the program for a while, they talk about using these steps on and on in their lives as they progress. It's one of our old timers likes to talk about the fact that the program is the first 164 pages of the book, and that it's a textbook. It's not a story. It's not a novel. It's a textbook. It's a set of instructions on how to live your life, and this is part of it. So, in here, it's a reconciliation to God's way of doing business. This seems to be a divinely inspired program. So if you're not sure what that means, it means just get on with doing the work and try to live your life along the precepts of the spiritual principles and the program as it's laid out in the big book and right in front of us here. So on that note, let's just keep moving forward. Do you want to do a little bit more there, Maya?
Sure, unless somebody else wants to hop in.
Well, why don't you take it to 7 and then we'll let
Sure.
somebody else jump in on spiritual attitude there.
Okay. 2, a willingness to work out a plan for suppression of self-centeredness through faith and a conscious contact with God. 3, to experience dissatisfaction as a result of our alcoholic practices and to seek a spiritual inspiration that will bring us an inner sense of peace and security. 4, increased faith, clean hearts and minds, ability to offer unselfish prayer. 5, the spiritual courage that is fearless in its outlook on life, a desire to make restitution to those our drinking has harmed. 6, a desire to quit bluffing and honestly give God a chance to remove from our lives all that stands in the way of our usefulness to Him and to others, true humility. 7, elimination of our defective character trait, acquisition of peace of mind and sobriety.
Awesome. Thank you. John, do you want to pick it up?
Sure. John, alcoholic.
Hey, John.
The spiritual attitude and satisfactory frame of mind necessary to effective fulfillment of these steps have been progressively worked toward in the completion of the first 5 steps of our program. Knowledge of our illness, alcoholism, prompts us to turn to God for help. The alcoholic must pray. There is no standard form of prayer to use. Our remorse over past mistakes and a genuine desire to correct them will indicate how we shall pray. I believe that is key idea number 3, if I'm not mistaken. Is it? Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we'll just take a moment and open it up for people to, we'll just go back and have a quick look at key idea 1 and 2 here. The spiritual lift, nearness to our Creator is experienced from, asking for help and our willingness to be free of our old thoughts. Is there anybody who's struggling with holding on to their old ideas and their old way of life?
Hi, Laura, alcoholic addict. I know I tend to go towards junk food, but not like excessively. And I know that it's the lesser of the evils. But honestly, when I do have that thought, I do go for it. Like I go for the chocolate bar or the bag of chips. So I'm like, how hard do I be on myself? Like I'm still eating good food aside from that for like regular meals, but I snack sometimes. Like, and I'm not doing it every night, but like, is that a problem? Or I guess if I think it's a problem, then it is.
Kind of like your drinking. If you think you have a problem with your drinking, then maybe you do. But I like that analogy because I can identify with that. I think John could tell you. I bring it up quite a bit. Like I've our youngest daughter lives at home with us, and she loves to bake, and she makes incredible chocolate chip cookies. And whenever she makes them, I can never have just one, especially when they're fresh out of the oven. Like having just one chocolate chip cookie is not possible for me. So whenever, if I'm feeling like I really don't need them at the time, I try to avoid having the first one. But I also know that it's a healthy reminder to me that I'm an alcoholic. I can't just have one. Doesn't matter what it is. If I reach out and have one cookie, I know I'm going to have 3 or 4 or maybe more. So I always use that as my reminder that I'm an alcoholic, and that hasn't changed. And I have tools to work with that, but it doesn't change the basic fact that I'm an alcoholic. So I don't know if that helps at
Yeah,
all.
and that's one of the benefits of doing the steps constantly, because I now have 35,000 DVDs, and that's because I couldn't stop buying them in the beginning. And but lately, the last couple of years, I haven't bought any. So it does go away, but it's taken me a long time. But it's only gone away as a result of me doing the steps. When I finish 12, I go back into 1 and go through them again, and I go back into 1, go through them again. It's like the prayer wheel in Asia. They got that prayer wheel that they just turn over and over and over, and that's what I do with the steps. And it does, it has fallen away. I no longer buy DVDs, even though I got these 35,000 here. I don't know how to get rid of them, but other than that, it's all good.
I guess the other question, Ron, do you have a DVD player?
Yep, I got 4.
Okay. Kind of hard to find those these days too.
Well, they all got area codes. You can only, if you buy something in Britain, you got to play it in Britain. You can't play it anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. That's amazing. Anybody else like to add in before we move on?
Hi, Susie Alcoholic.
Hey, Susan.
I'm really struck by the sentence, knowledge of our alcoholic problem prompts us to turn to God for help. The alcoholic must pray. It is so intuitively obvious to me now, but it wasn't like that. It's like that sentence, we have to turn to God for help, is so simple. But if you don't get it, like when I was an active alcoholic, I've always believed in God, and I've always had a higher power. It's not ever been an issue for me, but to turn to him for help, I got this. That was the attitude of, and that's the hard part, is when you see that and recognize it's admitting our powerlessness. All of that terminology matters when it adds up to what you're living in your life. Like thinking through it's powerlessness. If I don't turn to God for help, I'm powerless. Anyway, just appreciate, like y'all are talking about, for me, it's a new concept of doing the steps over and over. That's a kind of a different way of, addressing my alcoholism. And I'm finding it to be wonderful and so beneficial that I find it shocking that it took me this long to figure this out. I didn't figure it out. It took me this long to listen to the Lord to get me here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think that we all a lot of us would identify as Christians. We would all identify, say we believe in God maybe, or believe in a higher power, but when it comes down to, do we have any kind of a conscious contact or a connection, and that's what we've been working on, is breaking down those barriers and saying, hey, it's all right to actually talk to my higher power, and to ask for help. I know that was my biggest stumbling block, was my pride. I did not want to ask for help. I didn't, and I certainly didn't believe that, if there was a higher power, that it was going to be interested in helping me. And one of our old time members likes to talk about it. It says, you can't change the truth, but you can change your beliefs. And that's what happened when I got in here is, I started to let go of my old beliefs. My concept of a higher power, like we start the meeting out with a set aside prayer. I had to set aside all my old beliefs about what a higher power could and couldn't do, and the limitations that I put on it, and just open up to the idea that if I asked for help, it could be there. There's also a country song that I love that talks about prayer, and it says, your prayers are always answered, but sometimes the answer is no. And I had to, I love that idea because, it says, we ask for our character defects to be removed, but, it's on God's time, not our time. Just because we ask for something doesn't mean we're going to get it right away. We can ask for the help and guidance and then, take the next right action, but we have to leave the results in God's hands. And, that took a little, I love that idea that, I can always pray and sometimes I have to accept the fact that the answer might be no. And it's probably because there's something going on that I'm not aware of, and that there's bigger plans in mind. So I'll just add that in as well. Does anybody else like to speak up before we move on? Susie, did you want to pick it up from where you were and just take it a little bit further?
Okay. Let's see. So where I read the knowledge of, and then go to we all came before God as offenders. I'm looking at so I read, I was speaking about knowledge of our alcoholic problem prompts us to turn to God for help. The alcoholic must pray. There's no standard form for a prayer to use our remorse. So the next paragraph, right? We all came before God as offenders. We offer no alibis. We have no defense. We stand before him subject to the weakness of alcoholism or his strength to help in combating it. We wish to attest it, but only for selfish purposes. We ask forgiveness for sins we have committed. We ask for protection from self-pity, from resentments, from all selfishness. We ask for wisdom and understanding to know his will. We ask for spiritual and physical strength to execute his will. We ask him to keep us willing to follow the AA program. We thank him for the help it has given us and others. We ask him to credit its founders with this help. We acknowledge our many shortcomings. We humbly ask him to remove them. And I'll pass.
Excellent. Thank you. Actually, it's interesting because I think I've got an older version of the Little Red Book. So there's some lines in there that are in addition to what I have. But I'm just going to read paragraph from here again, the way that I've got it here, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of things in it. It says, we ask for an understanding of this illness and for his strength and help in attesting it, in arresting it. And we wish to arrest it, but only for unselfish purposes. We ask for forgiveness for the wrongs we have committed. We ask for protection from self-pity, from resentment, and from all selfishness. We ask for wisdom and understanding to know his will. And one of the things I was going to talk about earlier that I kind of skipped over was, one of the things that worked or they do in step 5 is come to understand humility in a much deeper way. I started to understand, like I said, my place, in the universe, that there is a God. I'm not it. But what I also came to understand is, that my character defects basically outlined me as, an egomaniac, an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. My ego built up this facade of who I thought I was, and I was secretly afraid you'd find out who I really thought I was. And by doing step 5, I came to understand that, I'm just a human. I have faults. I make mistakes, and that's okay. I can correct them. But what I started to understand as I went through it too is, and that was part of the exercise of looking at our assets as well as our liabilities, is, I'm better than I thought I was. And I wasn't I wasn't all I thought I was, but I was much better than I gave myself credit for. Yeah, that's a much healthier place to be. One of our members likes to talk about, this is where I brought my ego in alignment with who I really was. And when at that point, then that's when I can ask God to help me, become a better version of myself, move on to be the Gary 2.0 or the Jill 2.0 or the Susie 2.0 version of who I was. But it's understanding that, self-pity is not a healthy, like being self-deprecating or self-pity is just as dangerous as having an overinflated ego, and asking to have those things removed is very important. We ask for the wisdom and understanding to know his will. Like if you're self-pitying, how can you reach out and help somebody else? You don't have anything to offer them, right? So asking for help and letting those things go as well is very important. We ask for spiritual and physical strength to execute his will. Acknowledging our shortcomings, we sincerely pray to God that he will remove them. Our action is to ask for help, and then it's in God's hands to help us remove them. Our next steps is to practice these principles as much as we can in our lives, and live as well as we can in kind of accordance with a spiritual program, which is what this program is all about. And that's usually where the change kind of comes into play. Michelle, would you like to read maybe the up to the summarization?
Yes. Starting at prayer, our highest type of mental energy. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah. Prayer, our highest type of mental energy, serves a threefold purpose. By it, we ask God's help. We thank him for recovery, and we maintain our contented sobriety. There is nothing outstanding about an alcoholic's prayer to God. It is just a simple, sincere affair. The alcoholic who has nothing to lose but stands to gain sobriety, sane behavior, peace of mind, and happiness for him or herself and his or her family. There is latent power within each of us, develops through conscious contact with God. It replaces alcoholic fear and weakness with spiritual strength and understanding. Through it, the miracle of AA is possible. Step 6 and 7 utilize its contact, which thousands of alcoholics have humbly used in removing their defects of character. These 2 steps contain the forge that heats and forms the separate links that go into the new personality chains we are building. Without them, our rehabilitation is impossible.
Okay, we'll stop there for a minute then. Now, in the workbook, it talks about, it says, now we'll look at step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And as I was just talking about, the important point of that is humility. In order to sober up, it says there must be some traumatic event that is so shocking and painful, like hitting bottom, that it results in a major deflation of ego. I was just talking about that as well. I came to understand that my ego wasn't serving me. And I was, as I said, an egomaniac, but secretly, with an inferiority complex. And I had to learn that, humility was means being honest with myself and a true picture of myself, like both positive and negative. It and I didn't have to, as I say, I let down the facade that I was carrying. I became okay with just being me. And that's where the real freedom comes from is, it took a lot of psychic energy to keep the Gary 1.0 version of me functioning, to keep up the bravado of my ego and to deal with the suffering that I put myself through, thinking that I wasn't good enough. And when I was able to let that all go, life changed in a very dramatic way. Um, I guess the other simple part of this, what we've read through, there's a something that we like, the kind of summary of steps 1, 2, and 3 that I really like. It's like step 1 is I can't. Step 2 is he can, or they, my higher power can, and step 3 is I'm going to let him. And then it worked with my drinking. So here we're now asking that we take the same approach with the other defects that we've got. I can't really change them without being aware of them. And I can't really, I need to be able to put some spiritual work into getting rid of them, and I'm going to get out of the way and let this process take care of it. Yeah, it also says here, this step places character building and spiritual values first. This becomes the main purpose of our lives. Like trying to make sure my character, I'm doing the best I can to make my character better today is very important. And creating a positive character, along spiritual lines gives me a much better course of life. And that's what this step is about. It's just asking for help in doing that. John, would you maybe read through the summarization for us?
Yeah, sure. John, alcoholic. Summarization. Restoration of our mental and spiritual health is in direct proportion to our recognized need for help and our willingness to work for recovery. Dishonesty, brain damage, indifference, and reservations are the only limitations to our recovery. Reservations are those attitudes that oppose self-evaluation, cooperation, honesty, tolerance, forgiveness, faith, love, and unselfish prayer. These character defects stand between us and a contented sobriety. They perpetuate spiritual illness. Recovery from alcoholism is dependent upon their removal. A divine type of surgery is suggested by steps 6 and 7. Humble prayer becomes the spiritual scalpel with which God cuts the damaged portions from our sick personalities. Complete surrender to God's will assures us a painless, successful operation. Surrender of our defects to a higher power is not the spiritless act of a defeatist. It is the intelligent act of an alcoholic who replaces fear and weakness with spiritual courage, understanding, strength, and contented sobriety. So we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings.
Great. Thanks, John. So to kind of summarize it, it basically says there's strength in surrender. Getting out of the way, joining the winning side. I love that idea of surrender. It's like stop swimming against the current. Just get out of your own way and just try doing the next right thing. Ask for help and guidance. What I wrote a couple things down here when I was reading through those 2 paragraphs in the big book. And for me, it was like step 6 is preparing the state of mind. Like talks about the concept of openness. Just get open. And step 7 is the action, asking through prayer for help. you know, two simple paragraphs, but that's all it is, you know, if you've found you've developed a spiritual connection with your higher power through steps 4 and 5, now is the time just to put them into action and say, hey, you know, I've identified things that I don't like about myself. Now is the time to start making changes. And I just need some help doing that. And the best way for me to put it into action is to start living along these principles and being aware of my one of the biggest things that I found was, as some of the people on the screen talked about, is the fact that you now are aware of some of the things that are now identified as defects. You know, and you're also aware of some of the things that you thought were assets that actually, you know, are instincts out of balance, and you come into it now with awareness. And if you keep that awareness every day, you know, when those come up, you can pause and just say, hey, you know, like, this triggers me. This gets me going in a wrong direction. I need to ask for help to change that. You know, and for me, I don't know about anybody else here, but one of the things I used for that on a regular basis was the serenity prayer. You know, the courage to change, just asking for the courage to change the things I can. You know, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think I talked about the fact that at some point when we were reciting that one night, I heard it differently, you know, and I was telling myself the wisdom to go the distance, you know, and that I really like that concept, you know, like, get out of my way, just stick around and act with some integrity and apply the very simple principles of honesty, openness, and willingness in my life on a regular basis. And the very foundation of my life, as I said earlier, changed. You know, I rewired my thinking by just taking these simple steps, and whenever I could remember, applying them in my life. And you know, as somebody would say, it's not rocket science, and it's a pretty simple program. And you know, my natural instinct is to make it more complicated than it needs to be. So on that note, I'm just going to open up for some discussion on that. Is anybody on what we've read here talked about? Has anybody got anything they'd like to add?
Sure, I'll go.
Sure.
John, alcoholic.
John?
I was going to mention that it talks a lot about humility, and humility doesn't mean humiliation. It's actually not that at all. Humility means to be, or at least, you know, my understanding of humility means to remain teachable, to be, you know, remain, you know, open and honest to, you know, what lies ahead, and to, you know, continue to pray to your higher power, or God, as I like to call it, my higher power, God, and just continue to ask for him for help. And, you know, and especially if, you know, for me, I was able to identify some character defects that I still are, you know, still have, and I'm working to have him removed, but it's a process. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is a process. And if you keep asking for help with whatever defect is you're struggling with, you know, that will, you know, hopefully lead you to happy, contented sobriety. And it has in my life. So, yeah, that's what I've got.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Well, I'll say that this is a tricky 6 and 7 are really tricky in that I tend to think that maybe somehow I can do something, that somehow maybe I can be the one that and I see it in many other cases, many other people too. You know, they feel that, well, I shouldn't, you know, I'll stick with me, but somehow I can, if I got a problem eating, or if I got a problem spending money, or if I got a problem doing this or doing that, that somehow I can be the one that will be, and I can't. It has to be God. But I can't, for me, I didn't bring God into the picture until many years. Well, I'm sorry, but for many years, until when I was in recovery. It took many years before I actually began to even think that God had a part in this. And I'm just, I mean, I went to a lot of meetings, and I still do. And I heard this from other people, but it didn't penetrate. I needed something that had depth and weight. Uh, those are the only things I heard. And a lot of times they only came from one or two people throughout the whole meeting. And I would listen to those people, and because they had depth and weight, and I would listen to what they had to say. And gradually, I did begin to change, but it took a long time before I realized it wasn't up to me at all. I mean, I had to have the willingness to, uh, and I still got all kinds of defects, you know, uh, but they're, like I say, I don't no longer think, look at a person and think, what can I get from that person? I think what I can give to that person.
Yeah. And that's a spiritual way of acting.
Lisa
Yeah.
Lou Alcoholics.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, step 6 and 7. Wow. It's been a long time since I've done a series of steps. And so, what I was thinking, and this is interesting, that Ron shared too, was it's it's very mysterious. There's only two little paragraphs there. I think I'm going to have to read the 12 and 12 and reread what was just read with the Red Book, which really that part about the spiritual surgery and the divine timing, the spiritual surgery really spoke to me. I have been told there's a book called Drop the Rock, which does
Mhm.
speak a lot on step 6 and 7, because I am of the illusion that so if I have to quit smoking, or I'm wired to sugar, or whatever, that I admit my defects, become willing, and then when I ask God to please remove them, I have the thought in my head that that'll just happen. And I don't get that it could take whatever amount of time. It's very weird. But yeah, so I have to open my mind to what this really means. I think I remember reading somewhere where Bill W. talked about a lot of alcoholics have surrendered in their heart, step one, and with their drinking, they've surrendered to God, their drinking, but they have not surrendered their finances, their love life, their job life. Does that make any sense? Like they haven't surrendered their job, their love. So they do whatever they want still. And in actuality, there's something in the big book that says we surrender all of the areas of our life. So it appears to me that it has to get painful enough for people, and in my case, believe me, I got consequences. But that's what I'm seeing. Because when I first came into recovery years ago, I remember being so baffled by people, women I knew that were friends of mine, and some of them had like 22 years of sobriety, and they were acting out like sleeping with guys, going to the gambling casino, all this stuff. And I thought, well, why are they doing that if they've given up, if they've surrendered their life to God? Anyway, long story short, it is a bit baffling if I go at it with my intellect, and I'm not there yet, but I did appreciate the Red Book reading tonight. And my dilemma right now is praying to God to find the right person to do my step 5 with. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if you were on earlier, Lisa, where we were also talking about the fact that, we're reading through step 6 and 7, but until we get into step 7 and 8, there's still,
Yeah, I did.
still
I
lots
was,
of time to move forward in that. So,
yeah, I was here. Thank
yeah. Okay. Anybody else? It's anything they'd like to add to step 6 and 7 at this point?
so if you're doing if you pick a random person, like I might have to, I don't have an actual
Yeah.
sponsor, at least alcoholic, would I then immediately after doing the 5 with them, I would do that thing where they tell me to go and be quiet by myself for an hour for 6
Yeah.
and 7.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like I say, before you go to, and when you do your step 5, like I say, the important things there, when you choose somebody, if you're talking about a random person, hopefully it's somebody, whether it's clergy or a counselor or somebody,
Oh, someone
make
made
sure that they understand the process, that
right.
they're familiar with step 5, so they know what it is you're trying to achieve
I
through
guess
the
I'm just
exercise.
wondering. I guess you guys, I'm just wondering if I'm shorting myself trying to do this series of steps without a sponsor. I didn't do it on purpose. It became very complicated.
Yeah.
And so I'll just do like say a member of AA or in my home group or something. If I do a 5 with the 6 and 7 process, I'll then be back kind of just in the group on my own doing 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Or maybe God will send, I will find through
Yeah.
God's help an appropriate sponsor. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, you just need somebody who has enough experience and that you trust to do the work with. It doesn't have to be a sponsor. It can be somebody in one of the groups that you'd look up to that has what you want, and that they have sobriety behind their belt, and hopefully they've done a few step 5s with people. Like that's all it takes. It doesn't have to be a sponsor. That's somebody that that will trust and will hold your work
Thanks.
in their confidence. And
Thanks.
that's all it takes.
Okay, thanks. Peace, Laura.
Yeah. Laura, did you you trying to get? You
No,
trying to?
no, I was just, no, I'm good. Thank you.
It's watching your screen turn
I've learned,
sideways and upside down.
I know, because I was just trying to message, I was trying to message Barb.
Okay.
But anyway, I really appreciate what John was saying about humility because I didn't understand it. It took me so, and I finally just understood it now. Thank you, John. I was
Yeah, no
trying so
problem.
hard. I'm like, what am I not getting? What is humility? And then finally, just to that word, or the phrase, like to remain teachable. Thank you.
The two things we hear here is, as John said, to remain teachable, and the other one is just to be right sized.
Just to be what?
Right
Right
sized.
sized. Your ego is right.
Your
becomes
ego's actually
deflated.
in alignment with who you are.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So like
Check
you're
your
not
ego at the
better,
door.
like you're not better than somebody and you're not less than somebody kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I talked about when I got in here, I realized that, especially after doing my step 5, I was able to look people in the eyes and just say, hey, I'm Gary. I'm an alcoholic. This is just who I am. I didn't have to be better than anybody. I didn't have to be worse than anybody. I had every right to the same respect as anybody else as a human being. I didn't have to be a doormat, and I didn't have to be in charge of everything. I just had to be me, and with all my faults. And then the next steps start working on, creating a stronger character, getting rid of the things that aren't serving me anymore, and working on developing the things that I need to work on, helping get my instincts back into balance.
Can I ask a question? Can
Yeah.
I step in? I don't know if it's normal, but like the last both times I've done my step 5 with somebody, it was followed directly after with 6 and 7. Like that happened last week when I did my step 5. I did some step 5 work. We did steps 6 and 7 right after, and the same with my first sponsor. It was kind of like that was kind of what followed right directly after. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if I should have maybe waited because I still now realize that we didn't complete my step 5 before moving on.
Well,
But
you
I
can.
can go back and then still do. I mean, really, honestly, I think I do 6 and 7 every day because I say those prayers. I say the step 3 prayer, a combination, step 7 prayer. Like the way I pray and what I've been asking for daily is kind of like doing the 6 and 7 almost daily, anyways. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. At our meetings, we read the step 7 prayer as part of our meeting format pretty well every night
Mhm.
for that exact reason. It's an ongoing process. It's not a once over and done kind of thing, right? It's as John talked about earlier too. Talks about in the book. This is a program to follow for the rest of your life. It's you say you do a set of steps, but then you start to apply these steps in your daily activities going forward, and that's what helps you align your life with a spiritual way of life. It helps encourage honesty. It helps encourage willingness. It reminds you when you're not open to something. Whenever I start to feel irritable and restless or discontent, I've got a problem with acceptance. And acceptance, the foundations of acceptance is being honest what's going on in my life, being open to the idea that something's got me out of alignment and willing to change it. How? Honesty, openness, and willingness. They just become a real fundamental part of my spiritual toolbox. Anyway, it is approaching 7:30 here. Is there anybody else that would like to add anything before we start to close up here? Oh, I guess I should point out homework for this week. If you still are trying to get your step 4, 5, and 6, or 4 and 5 complete, please try to get that nailed down and start reading through read the 2 paragraphs for chapter 6, nice and simple. Page 76, first 2 paragraphs, and then the 12 by 12, steps 6 and 7, and the little red book, steps 6 and 7. Nice and simple, just reminders of what we've already read through here tonight, and then put it into practice. Just reach out and pray to your higher power for the relief from the character defects that are holding you back from doing His will for you, or your Creator's will for you, however you want to describe it. And that's about all we need to do for this week. And then don't get hung up on steps 7 and 8, or 8 and 9. Don't read ahead.
I was just reading it. As you said that, I was like, oh yeah, this. But at least I have well, not at least, it doesn't matter. I don't know why I said that. It doesn't make
Just-
sense. But
Just
I have
practice the
my
prayer.
step 8 list, my amends list already. And because I've only done one of them, I feel like I've kind of ahead of it. Hopefully I don't have to add more.
Okay, and
Okay.
I'm going to go to another meeting, so
Okay.
I'll bid you all
We're going to get ready
goodbye.
for it too. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Bye.
I'm sure Amy will clean this up, and we'll get the important parts put together as part of and posted as a reference early next week for
Well,
resource.
good.
You.
Bye all.
Thank you very much, one and all, and
Yeah.
we'll see you next Saturday.